This is Algebra 2, Unit 13, Lesson 1 on variability in sampling. Now, we use a lot of data all over different things. It's in newspapers, science classes, economics, everything, where variability occurs. Variability is simply the property of outcomes being different. So, why things are different, pretty much. The tools of statistics are designed to explain this variability. So we want to explain why things are different from each other. And there's many types of variability. So let's look at the different sources that we have so that we can see which ones we're going to be studying. So these are kind of the following types of variability can change the uniformity of the data set. So that's what makes a set different. So let's look at an example from any field. All right, the first kind of variability is observational or measurement variability. That is variability that is introduced due to either our measuring instruments not being precise enough or differences in how two different people read the measurement. Okay, so for example, that's if you have two students drop a ball. Drop a ball, and they time how long it takes. How long it takes to hit the ground. So when it hits the ground, they take a measurement. All right, so why would that not be the same for every person? Well, it can change. They can have different reaction times. They can have different reaction times. They can see when the ball hits the ground or when they start the timer. Starts or stops. So that's just because of your reflexes. Okay, it doesn't mean that somebody's right or wrong. It just means that that's why there will be a variability in that sample. So everybody will get a different reaction time from that. So that's observational measurement variability. So that's what makes your samples different because of different reaction times. Okay, the second kind of variability is natural variability. Sometimes it's called inter-individual variability. That is variability that accounts for the fact that members of populations are simply different. Okay, so what makes a population vary? For example, two people work out the same amount of time. The same amount of time, but lose a different amount of weight. All right, so that can be due to other factors besides just working out. It could be something about metabolism or what they're eating or different things. So even though two people may do have exactly the same workout, both of them may not lose the same amount of weight because there are other factors that come into account. All right, just because the factors, they're different. Okay, if, for example, also another example, say you have two plants and you give them the same amount of light and water. But will they always grow to the same height? No. But they could grow to different heights. So that means that's the way they are. So that is just because of natural variability. Okay, so it's just something innate in the plant that happens to it. It isn't anything affected by the water or the light. It's just that they're going to grow to different heights. So that is the second kind of variability. All right, the third kind of variability is called induced variability. This type of variability is in marked contrast to natural. We're going to make something happen. It occurs because we have assigned our population or sample to two or more treatment groups and then observe the variability between the groups. Okay? So, for example, two groups are given a cholesterol drug and a placebo. A cholesterol drug. Well, one group is given a cholesterol drug and the other was a placebo. placebo. So one group gets the cholesterol and one gets the placebo. Okay? So what we're looking for is variability in cholesterol levels is induced. Okay, because we have the two different groups, we are looking at how that placebo and the cholesterol drug make the samples different. So that is induced variability. We're putting something into groups and comparing the two groups based on different things that we want to measure. So the variability is going to be induced because one has cholesterol drug and one does not, and we want to see if there's a difference there. So that is induced. That one is used a lot when you see like blind tests and that kind of thing, double blind tests. So when you are looking at induced variability, you are putting something into groups to see what happens. Okay, and then the last kind of variability is called sample variability. This is the type of variability that occurs when we take multiple samples from a population, here's the key word, randomly. These samples will be different due to the randomness of the sampling process. So multiples of samples of people are surveyed, for example, for when you're looking at political candidates. Multiple samples are taken from surveys of political candidates. Now, when you take a survey of political candidates, if you take multiple samples, the differences in who people pick is due to sampling variation. So if you're just going to randomly call a bunch of people, you're not going to call everybody in the United States to take the sample. You just are to take a survey. You're going to call a certain group, certain people. Now, hopefully, it'd be some kind of random sample so that it's just due to the random nature of the sampling process. So you're not saying one or the other, but the samples are taken. So to try to make a prediction when you do that. So sample variability is one we use for that. Okay, now that we've looked at the different ways that we have variability, let's look at the situations where they collect data. All right, so there are many different situations in which we collect data. They have important differences, and all of them depend on randomization in one way or the other. So there are three major types of ways to collect data. Okay, so let's take a look at how randomization is used. Randomization is used primarily to eliminate variability caused by some kind of bias. All right, bias is very important. You don't want to skew your results towards one or another based on what group you're looking at. All right, so let's take a look at a survey. Surveys are collections of data for a population where variability is not induced by treatments, but by the sample itself, which is sampling variability. So basically, if you are looking at a marketing company looking at selling soda, they want to know what soda is preferred. Is preferred. It's like, for example, soda A versus soda B. All right, so if a marketing company does that, you are looking at a random sample of the population. All right, so where would we go to get a random sample of the population? Well, where would be a good place to be a random sample? Well, probably if you went to a place where everybody goes where there's no particular bias. All right, now what if you were looking at a grocery store? All right, so ask people outside a grocery store. Just a general grocery store like Price Chopper or IGA, because that's where they would buy their sodas, or Walmart or whatever. That's outside a grocery. But what if you asked outside, for example, like a health food store. If you asked outside a health food store, would they necessarily drink soda? Probably not. So you have to be aware that there could cause bias. So you want to be as random as possible. And you don't want it to do any place where there would be not induced by treatment. So that would that could cause bias. So because that outside a grocery store would be random. If you outside a health food store, that would probably cause bias because a lot of people that would go to a health food store probably would not drink soda. So you have to be aware when you do a survey, when you're collecting data, just going around and randomly asking people, you have to make sure that you're not causing any kind of bias. Okay, observational studies is the second kind. It's collection of data from population where assignment of individuals from the population to treatment groups is not under the control of those performing the study. Okay, so for example, on that, you want to explore if a person's state of residency has a relationship to income. Person's state of residency has a relationship to income. All right, so basically what you want to know is if the people live in this state, does that have an effect on what kind of income they have? All right, now the person would be assigned to a group based on where they lived. Okay, so that's based on where they live. So if you want, again, you want to make sure it's random. You wouldn't want to test like people in New York City if you're that would probably have a lower income or higher income, or it's not a certain group. So if you're looking at an area where it's fairly wealthy, like a place where it has a lot of colleges, like Connecticut, for example, they would have a higher income probably because they're higher educated. So you have to be very careful of where your studies come from. All right, and then the third one is experimental studies. In experimental studies, individuals are assigned randomly to treatment groups in order to determine the effect of the treatment on the variability of the data. In these cases, the assignment, although random, is under the control of those performing the study. All right, so this is, if you have, for example, you're making an experiment of seeds divided into two groups. One with organic fertilizer, and the other is synthetic fertilizer, and then you want to see how they grow. Fertilizer. And then see how they grow. All right, so that would be experimental study because you're actually doing the experiment. Okay, so you're looking for the greater growth rate. So that you design your experiment using those variables so that you can track which one has the better growth rate. All right, so this is one that you use in science a lot. So randomization is very, very important when you're doing experimentals so that you can test what you want to test. Okay, and random sampling is critical for being able to minimize variability due to sampling bias. So random sampling can be done using a variety of different techniques. Simple random sampling can be accomplished using a random number table. And we'll be talking about this in the next lesson, so hang on to this for the next lesson. So you should know what the different kinds of variability are and what kind of sampling there is as well.